Hey, Marie here. Welcome on this video where I'm gonna tell you and we're gonna talk about how to learn French. Now, this video is going to be especially useful if you are a beginner, so if you have just started learning French, or if you are a false beginner. A false beginner is someone who has started learning French a long time ago, but has stopped in between, and now you kind of remember some things, but you basically need to start again. You need to start at the base of French again. So this video is going to be especially useful for you too, and it doesn't matter why you are learning French really. Here we're going to talk about how to learn French in general. If you are learning French for pleasure, it would be exactly the same thing in this video for you as if you are learning French because you need it. For example, you want to move to France or you need to get a job where you need to speak French, okay? So, if you don't know me, I'm going to introduce myself. I am Marie, I am a French native, as you can hear. I'm also a French teacher. I'm the founder of Just French It, which is a YouTube channel, but also mainly a website, justfrenchit.com, where you can find plenty of information about how to learn French, about the French language, about French culture, and, anything related to the French language, really. Now, I'm also the developer of the 3-step method, which is a method that you can use to learn French in 6 months or to be able to speak French in 6 months. And my specialty is really in, natural French, the French that you will hear if you go to France, the French that you will need to speak to make yourself understood. And this is really my mission, is to make you speak French. Okay, cool. Now that's out of the way, we can start with this video. And the first thing I wanted to tell you is maybe this is not, the first video that you're watching on how to learn French. And, I know that there are a lot of those types of video on the web, a lot of those types of blogs also on the web. And you might have read or watched a lot of information, a lot of tips, a lot of advices on how to learn French. And the first thing that I wanted to tell you is that in this video, we're not going to talk about tips. I'm not going to give you, hacks or tips, because those things won't teach you French. There, I said it. Tips and hacks won't teach you French. I know that it can be a bit sad to hear, maybe sad, but a little bit tragic, because on the web there are, especially on YouTube, there are a lot of videos with those hacks, and I know that beginners are watching those and they expect to be able to learn French from those hacks. The problem is that hacks and tips are optimizers. They're not here to make you speak French, they're here to make you speak French faster, or to make you learn French faster, or in another way, or in a funner way, etc. But they're not here to make you really teach you French. So if you have zero experience, if you don't know where to begin, if you start with hacks, you're not going to optimize anything because you don't have anything to optimize. So you will still be at the same level even if you follow those hacks. Okay, so here today I'm not going to give you tips, I'm going to give you principles. And to make you really understand the difference between tips and principles, I prepared this little thing for you. Now imagine I was here to teach you how to make your bed. Okay, I could tell you lots of tips. I could tell you lots of hacks, okay? I could tell you to tap your pillows at the end. I could tell you to make things straight, etc. But the problem is that this is not going to teach you how to make your bed, right? One of the principles of making your bed is that you start with the bottom. You start with the fitted sheet at the bottom, right? That's a principle. If you don't know this principle and you start to tap your pillows at the end, that's not going to make your bed better if in the first place it wasn't good. Okay, in another subject, in another topic, for example, if I was here to teach you how to cook, I could tell you lots of tips and hacks also here. I could tell you, for example, to sprinkle your plate with nuts at the end of your cooking so that it's beautiful. That's very good, but that's not actually going to make what's on your plate or in your plate good, right? That's just going to make it pretty at the end, that's all. So one of the principles I should teach you, if I was here to teach you how to cook, would be that fats and water don't mix and that you need to do something about that, okay? Cool. Now, in another, if you are into social media, and this is something that I'm really interested about, but one of the tips that you hear a lot is you need to post your content at a certain time. You need to post on Facebook, or to post on Twitter, or to post on YouTube at a certain time. That's a tip. That's a tip, right? That's a hack. But that's not a principle, because one of the principles of creating content is to create engaging content for your people. Okay? If you don't create engaging content, if you can post it at any time of the day, it's not going to make any difference. Okay? Cool. So it's the same for learning French. You need not tips, but principles. You need principles to learn French, and that's what this video is going to be about. Now, there are two kinds of principles that I'm going to share with you. Principles of language learning, because after all, learning French is learning a language, and it's not that different in the theory than learning Spanish or learning Mandarin or learning Greek. And also principles of French learning, because we're not learning Spanish, we're not learning Mandarin, we're learning French, and there are some specific principles that you should follow. Okay? Good. Now let's start with the first type of principle, the principles of language learning, and I have 3 principles for you. Principle number 1 is that in language learning, there are 4 pillars, the 4 pillars of language learning. That's what linguists and language teachers and language coaches are going to work on when they are developing methods, for example. Now, what are the 4 pillars? It's very simple. The 4 pillars are listening, reading, speaking, and writing. Listening, reading, speaking, writing. Now, to be able to learn a language, to a master level, to be able to become fluent in this language, you would need those 4 pillars. You would need to become very good at listening. You would need to become really good at reading, at speaking, and at writing. Okay? In the perfect of the perfect worlds, total fluency means that you can do all 4 pillars. So listening, reading, speaking, and writing. Okay. But practicality, if we take into account practical and life in general, life as it is, it's not going to be, perfectly balanced between listening, reading, speaking, and writing. Okay. You probably are going to be better at listening, maybe, depending on your personal preferences, depending on who you are and how you learn, etc. You're going to become better at one of those 4 pillars, 1 or 2 of those 4 pillars more quickly than others, okay? But that doesn't mean that you should completely follow about reading or speaking, because that means, those things are going to help one another. If you are learning how to listen, it's going to improve how you are speaking. If you are learning how to read, it's going to improve how you are writing as well. So those 4 pillars will be more or less, not exactly, balanced between each other, and you need to incorporate those 4 activities into your learning for you to learn. And if you want to be fluent, or if you want to be able to communicate in French, you need to be able to work on those 4 pillars of language learning. And this is really important. This is why it's the principle number 1. Okay, cool. Now, principle number 2 is learning versus practice. Now, in your how can I say that? In your French strategy, if you will, there's going to be 2 of them, right? There's going to be the learning part and the practice part. If you are missing one of those, it's not going to work. If you are not learning, you can't practice, and if you are not practicing, you can't speak French. You will not be able to use your French at all. So, what is learning and what is practicing? Learning is when you collect information. For example, when you are watching a video, if you are watching a lesson on my channel, for example, this is collecting. This is learning information. Okay. And then you have, on the other side, practice. Practice is when you use this information, I like to give you these images. Generally, it's like you put things in your brain when you are learning. You put things in boxes and you organize your space to a certain a certain way to be able for you to remember things more easily. It's like if it was your bedroom, right? You put things into little boxes and you know where things are, etc. That's learning, right? And then you have practicing. Practicing is when you need to go in your room and find something to be able to use it. For example, you need to find your toothbrush. Now, where did you put your toothbrush? You put your toothbrush in your box of bathroom items, for example. Okay, and that's practicing. So you take things, you put them in your little bedroom in your head, and then you take things from your little bedroom and you use them. Okay, and those two are actually essential to your learning strategy. But now there is something, one of them, in my opinion, should be done more than the other, and it is practice. Now 70%, now that's a percentage that is, it's not exactly 70%, but it kind of gives you an idea of how much you need to practice. 70% of your French learning should be practice. Practice. Because when you are learning something, right? When you are learning something, you put stuff in your bedroom, right? But if you put too much stuff in your bedroom, you don't have the time to organize and to remember where you put things. So in reality, for practical reasons, you should be going in your bedroom to take things and use things more than you put things in your bedroom, right? If that makes sense. And it's the same for learning French. You should be using your French almost double the time that you are actually learning French. Okay, so if you are following a lesson, for example, on my channel, one of the last lessons I posted was about masculine and feminine. So if you are following this lesson, you should be, before you start, collecting more and more information about how French is supposed to be working, about French lessons and French grammar, etc. You should be using this information to be able to learn it and to remember where you put it in your brain so that you can use it over and over again and use it in a good way. Okay, so remember that practice is something that you should do way more than learning, even if you are a beginner, and that's the principle number 2 of language learning. Now, principle number 3, and the last principle of language learning, kind of goes with the practice, and it's to make mistakes. Making mistakes is really, really, really important in language learning. And this is where a lot of learners are falling short because they don't want to make mistakes. I mean, we are in a society that tells you shouldn't make mistakes. You shouldn't say certain things, you shouldn't do certain things. If not, all the people are going to make fun of you, or you're going to become an outcast, or you become... And, all those things are ingrained into us. When we are children, especially, and it becomes a block when we are adults to learning new things because we don't want to make mistakes. But the thing is, and deep down that perfection doesn't exist, and you cannot become perfect at learning French if you are not making mistakes. You cannot become really good at French if you're not making mistakes. For one practical reason is that mistakes and errors that you're gonna do, mistakes and errors for me are in the same category. They actually tell you what you need to work on, what you need to be able to make your French better. To give you a situation, for example, you are in France, you've moved to France, and you are still in the process of learning French. Okay, you know the basics of learning French, but okay. And you are speaking with your neighbor, which is a very old lady, and she's really nice, and you want to converse with her, and you want to actually get to know her. And you realize that when you are asking a certain type of questions, she doesn't really understand you. I mean, the rest is fine, but when you are asking this question, she doesn't understand you, and she actually answers something that you weren't expecting. In that case, you know that you've made a mistake, and you find that when you ask this type of question, even to another person, it doesn't work either. What does it tell you? It tells you that this type of question, maybe you're not saying it right. Maybe you're not putting the words in the right order, or maybe you're not pronouncing it the right way. And so that tells you that you need to work and you need to look at this specific type of question to be able to resolve this problem that you have. So mistakes are like little problems that you find on the way, okay? And problems, what do they have? They have solutions. And so when you are finding a solution to a problem, your French becomes better and little bit better and little bit better. And that's really how you learn languages, really. You make a mistake, you find a solution to not make this mistake, and you go on to the next problem. Actually, this is not something that is only for language learning. It's something that happens in all kinds of subjects and thematics and topics. That, making mistake is really, really, really important to your learning. So don't be afraid to make mistakes. Actually, enjoy making mistakes, because that means that you can go back into learning and check out what you've done wrong and improve yourself. And this should be the mentality that you have when you are speaking another language. So let's recap the 3 principles of language learning. You have the principle number 1, which is the 4 pillars, and that your learning strategy should have all 4 pillars, which are reading, writing, speaking, and listening. Then you have the principle of learning versus practice, and that you should be practicing way more than you are learning, and my image of this little bedroom in your head. And finally, the principle number 3, which is to make mistakes. Now, if you are following the 3, you are, you have to make progress. It's automatic. It's gonna happen anyway. Whatever you do, whatever hack you use, whatever tip you follow, if you are following those 3 principles, it's going to work. It's going to work. Now, for learning French, let's get a little bit more specific and learn the principles of French learning. Principles of French learning, so that's the part number 2. Now, principle number 1 is that you don't need all the grammar. I know that in French, and French learners are a little bit afraid of French grammar, because yes, there is a lot of it, and there is obviously a lot of exceptions. And this can be a blockage. But the principle that you need to follow is that you don't need everything of it, okay? When you are speaking English, if your native language is English, or if you are following this video, you obviously speak English or you understand English. You are not using every single rule of the English language, okay? You probably, if you are speaking to a very fluent level of English, if you are a really good English speaker, then you don't even remember the more advanced rules, you just use them, right? Well, in French, it's going to be the exact same way. You don't need all the grammar. You only need to concentrate on what will make you speak French or what you will use to communicate. And then you will kind of, work on those foundations that you've built, and you will progress over time. But really, at the beginning, you don't need a lot of grammar. And actually, in my program, which is called the French Academy, in the French Academy, which follows the 3-step method that I talked to you about in the introduction, there isn't a lot of grammar. Actually, there is like 2 months of grammar lessons, and that's all. Because once you get through those grammar lessons, you have everything you need to be able to communicate in French. And what we talk about really is mainly sentence structures. So where to put words in a sentence and how to, make or convey information through French, and a few tenses, because tenses, you need to understand tenses at some point. So really, with those 2 things of the French language, which, okay, it regroups a lot already of grammar, okay, but sentence structure and a few tenses, you can already, speak French to a very, very advanced level with just that. And that's what you should be thinking about when you are learning French. That means that if you find yourself confused about French language, confused about exceptions, confused about grammar, etc., that means that you've gone too deep and that you don't need all of this just right now. If you're not sure how to use it, or if you have, if you're even confused about how to even, fill in the exercises maybe of that grammar point, then that means that you've gone too far and that you need to go back a little bit, that there is something that you haven't understood before, that you haven't mastered before, that is more important than what you are learning right now. Okay, so that's principle number 2. Principle number 1, sorry, you don't need all the grammar. And then there is the principle number 2, which is about pronunciation. Now, in French, in a lot of languages actually, but in French especially, pronunciation is super duper important. I've seen people who are almost masters at French grammar. Really, they know more than me about French grammar. You know, they can explain to you very difficult things, but the pronunciation really isn't good. And in that case, well, it kind of, takes all their work away from them, because when you are hearing them speaking French, it doesn't work. And that actually goes with the 4 pillars of language learning, but pronunciation in French is super duper important. And there is another thing that is important is enunciation as well. You have the pronunciation, that is the way that you are going to produce the sounds, to make the sound of French, for example, the vowels or the consonants. And then you have enunciation, and enunciation is the way that you are going to pronounce all the words in a sentence. And you know that in certain languages, you can almost hear a sort of music. There is a rhythm to sentences. There is, and in French there is this rhythm, and this rhythm is very monotonous. But you need to understand this rhythm and mimic this rhythm to be able to make yourself understood very much more easily than with just pronunciation. You could pronounce all the letters, all the sounds right in French, but then if you don't have the right enunciation, it can be a little bit difficult for us to understand you, for French natives actually to understand you. So you should work on both those things, pronunciation and enunciation, during your strategy. Okay, so there is really just that. In French learning principles, you have only 2, that you don't need all the grammar, and that you need to work principally and mainly on your enunciation and pronunciation. Now, if you want to do all of this, if you want to apply all those principles, you should sign up for the French Club, where I'm going to talk about the 3-step method. And you'll see that the 3-step method is a method that combines all those principles and that can make you speak French in only 6 months. So if you want to speak French, if you are a beginner right now, a false beginner, if you have, for example, a project to move to France, this is really the method that you should check out. At least check it out. Check out if it's for you. Obviously, it's not for everyone, but check out if it's for you, and I'm sure it's going to help you no matter what. Okay? So sign up for the French Club. The link is in the description below this video. And, well, that's it for me. I hope you enjoyed today. If you have questions, you can ask me questions in the comments. I'll make sure to answer everyone that asks questions nicely, obviously, because sometimes I get a little bit of weird comments, let's say it like that. Well, that's it for me. I'll see you in another video on Just French It. Bye bye.